All right, for this explainer, we're diving into a really powerful piece by journalist Sampath Samarakoon. It asks a pretty tough question. What's the real cost of demanding justice? And maybe more importantly, when does that demand stop being advocacy and start getting labeled as an attack on the government itself?
So this is the central question the author is wrestling with here. It's one of those things that really makes you think about where that line is. Where does fighting for a cause end, and where does political opposition begin, especially when you think about it from the perspective of the people in power and their supporters?
How did this whole thing kick off? It wasn't some big planned campaign. It wasn't a major political speech. Nope. It all started with just one social media post. So let's trace this story from that initial spark all the way to the author's really powerful conclusion.
So here's where it began. The author shared some information online about a protest happening in the north of Sri Lanka. And almost immediately, he started getting slammed by supporters of the new Renaissance government. They weren't seeing it as journalism. They saw it as an attack.
Now, to really get why the reaction was so intense, you have to understand the protest itself. This wasn't just any political rally. It was held on Independence Day, and it was led by the families of people who'd been forcibly disappeared. We're talking about elderly mothers who've been protesting for over 3,000 days straight. Imagine that. They were out there carrying photos of their missing children, just asking for one simple thing: answers.
And this was their plea. It's a direct, just gut-wrenching quote from those mothers. It's not some political slogan, right? It's a deeply human appeal for closure. They're not asking for power or for money, just for the truth about their kids.
And yet, for just sharing this story, this cry for justice, the author suddenly found himself being labeled. People started calling him anti-government, even racist. And it's that reaction that sparked this entire article.
So, to respond to these accusations, the author does something really interesting. He doesn't just argue about the present. Instead, he lays out his own history to show that his position on justice has always been consistent, no matter who's in charge. And this timeline just lays it out so clearly. Under the Rajapaksa regime, he was part of the anti-war camp, he was protesting oppression, even when he was getting threats. Then, under the Wickremesinghe government, he stood with Tamil communities when courts tried to stop them from holding remembrance events. And now, under this new Renaissance government, he's doing the exact same thing, and, you guessed it, getting the exact same label, just from a new group of critics.
It reveals this really clear pattern, doesn't it? The label anti-government has just followed him around, no matter which political party is in the driver's seat. It's almost like it's the default thing to say when supporters of a government are faced with someone advocating for people on the margins.
And this, right here, is where we get to the climax of the article. Because when he's faced with this accusation yet again, the author doesn't try to deny it. He doesn't back down. Instead, he walks right up to it, confronts it head-on, and decides to reclaim that label on his own terms.
He starts by completely reframing the debate. He just lists his actions, standing for truth, for justice, for the rights of the oppressed. And then he puts the question right back to his critics. Basically saying if that is what you're calling anti-government, then fine. He doesn't just accept the label, he embraces it. It's such a powerful way to turn an accusation into a statement of principle.
And then he makes it even sharper, boiling the whole thing down to its simplest form. Is the very act of asking for justice now an act of opposition?
And there it is again. He fully owns it. He's turning this political insult into a badge of honor, a declaration that his loyalty is to the idea of justice itself, not to any political party.
So, in the last part of his article, the author kind of zooms out. He moves beyond his own personal story and starts talking about the bigger picture, what democracy means, what it means to be a citizen, and the very real danger of blind political fandom.
He brings it back to the absolute fundamentals of democracy. A government, he says, isn't some private company owned by its supporters. It's there to represent all citizens. It's managing public money, and its power, its sovereignty, comes from the people. So because of all that, every single citizen has the right, and maybe even the duty, to criticize it.
And this all leads to his final and pretty stark warning. He draws a direct line between the behavior he saw from supporters of the last regime and what he's starting to see from some supporters of the new one. The tactics, labeling critics, trying to shut down dissent, demanding this kind of blind loyalty, he argues they're worryingly similar. It's a huge caution against repeating the very political culture they said they wanted to change.
And so, we end up right back where we started, with a question that this article really forces you to think about. Where exactly is the line between holding a government accountable and being disloyal? And maybe the bigger question is, who gets to decide where that line is drawn?